It was 2 a.m. in a freezing drizzle when Rick, the new dispatcher who'd never changed a tire, fired me over the radio. He called me too slow for a woman and cut my feed. He didn't realize I was the only operator certified for heavy recovery in 3 counties. 2 hours later, an 18-wheeler jackknifed, blocking the interstate, and Rick had no one to call. The smell of diesel and cold asphalt is something you never really scrub out of your skin. My husband, bless his heart, used to say I smelled like a mechanic shop wrapped in vanilla perfume. After 30 years on the road, I didn't notice it anymore. It was a Tuesday, specifically 2:14 a.m. I know the time because the red digital numbers on the dashboard of the Beast, my 60-ton rotator tow truck, were glaring at me in the darkness. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets, that nasty, freezing kind of rain that turns the interstate into a skating rink. I was parked on the shoulder of I-95, finishing up a winch-out of a delivery van that had slid into a ditch. My boots crunched on the gravel as I walked around the rig, checking the hydraulic stabilizers. I moved methodically. You don't rush with a 60-ton truck. You rush, people die. A cable snaps under tension, and it cuts through steel like butter. I checked the tension, checked the chains, and finally gave the thumbs up to the state trooper shivering in his cruiser behind me. I climbed back into the cab, shaking the water off my yellow reflective jacket. The cab was my sanctuary. It was warm, smelled of coffee, and had photos of my grandkids taped to the sun visor. I keyed the mic to call into base. "Dispatch, this is Unit 1. Recovery complete. Scene is clear. Heading back to the yard," I said, my voice raspy from the cold air. Usually I'd get a tired, "Copy that, Diane," from old Jerry, the night dispatcher who had been with Henderson Towing as long as I had. But Jerry had retired 2 weeks ago. Now we had Rick. Rick was 26. He had a degree in business management, a closet full of polo shirts, and an opinion on everything. He had been hired by Mr. Henderson's son to modernize the workflow. In Rick's mind, towing wasn't about physics or safety, it was about turnover rates. "Unit 1, what took you so long?" Rick's voice crackled over the radio. He sounded wide awake and annoyed, probably sitting in the heated office with his feet up. I frowned, shifting the Beast into gear. The engine roared, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the floorboards. "Conditions are bad, Rick." Black ice on the shoulder. Had to reset the stabilizers twice to ensure I didn't slide while winching. "Standard winching protocol is 45 minutes, Rick shot back. "You've been out there for 1 hour and 10. You're killing my metrics, Diane." Metrics, that was his favorite word. He had charts on the wall in the break room. He tracked how long it took us to drink coffee. "It's not a standard winch, Rick," I said, trying to keep my patience. "It's a mud recovery in freezing rain. If I rushed it, I would have torn the axle off that van." "Excuses," he scoffed. The static on the line made his voice sound tinny, but the arrogance came through loud and clear. "Mike cleared a rollover in 40 minutes last night." "Mike drives a flatbed," I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I'm driving a 60-ton rotator. It's apples and oranges." "It's efficiency, Diane, just get back here. I need to talk to you about your performance reviews." There, underwhelming. I didn't reply. I just merged onto the empty highway, the wipers slapping a rhythm against the windshield. The rain was blurring the lights of the distant city, but my vision was clear. I knew this job, I knew this truck, and I knew that Rick was dangerous. He treated heavy machinery like toys in a sandbox, and he treated me like a relic that needed to be dusted off and thrown away. I didn't know it yet, but my 30-year career was about to hit a brick wall. The drive back to the yard usually took 30 minutes. That night, I made it in 25, mostly because I was seething. The rain had picked up, drumming against the roof of the cab like 1,000 tiny hammers. When I pulled into the Henderson towing lot, the floodlights were reflecting off the puddles, turning the oil-stained asphalt into a mirror. I parked the Beast in its designated spot, Bay 1, reserved for the heavy-duty wreckers. There were only 2 heavy wreckers in the fleet. The other one, an older model we called Rusty, was currently in the shop with a blown transmission. That meant the Beast was the only operational heavy recovery vehicle for a 50-mile radius, and I was the only one on shift certified to operate it. I killed the engine, grabbed my logbook, and climbed down. The wind bit at my face as I walked toward the dispatch office. Through the glass window, I could see Rick. He was sitting at the master console, illuminated by the glow of 4 computer monitors. He was typing furiously, a headset clamped over his gelled hair. I pushed the door open. The warmth hit me instantly, along with the smell of stale coffee and floor wax. "You're finally back," Rick said without looking up. He kept typing. "I'm back," I said, placing my logbook on the counter. "You wanted to talk about my performance." Rick spun his chair around. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my muddy boots and the gray hair escaping from under my beanie. He smirked, a little twitch at the corner of his mouth that made my blood boil. "Diane, let's be honest," he began, clasping his hands behind his head. "This job requires a certain pace, a certain energy. I get the job done, Rick, and I do it without damaging the vehicles or getting officers killed." "But you're slow," he interrupted. "Painfully slow. I've been looking at the GPS data. You take longer to hook up, longer to winch, longer to clear the scene than anyone else on the roster." "I take longer to hook up because I double-check my chains," I said, my voice steady. "I take longer to clear because I sweep the glass off the road so nobody gets a flat tire later. It's called professionalism." Rick chuckled, shaking his head. "It's called being past your prime. Look, Diane, I know Henderson has a soft spot for the old crew, but I'm here to trim the fat. This isn't a knitting club. It's a high-pressure logistics environment." I felt a heat rising in my chest that had nothing to do with the office heater. "I can outdrive, outrig, and outwork any man in this fleet, Rick, including you." He stood up then, trying to use his height to intimidate me. He was tall, but he was soft. D never had to muscle a drive shaft back into place on the side of a snowy highway. "See, that's the attitude I don't like," he said, his voice dropping to a condescending tone. "You're defensive, and frankly, female tow drivers are just slow. It's a biological fact. You overthink things, you worry too much. We need decisive action." The room went silent. The hum of the computer fans seemed to get louder. "Excuse me," I whispered. "You heard me," Rick said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's 2:30 a.m., Diane. I don't have time to debate gender dynamics with you. I'm making a command decision. I'm taking you off the roster. Go home." "You're firing me?" I asked, struggling to process the sheer stupidity of what I was hearing. "I'm restructuring you out of a position," he corrected, smirking again. "Effective immediately. Hand over your keys and your gate pass. We'll mail you your final check." I stared at him. I thought about the 30 years I'd given this company. I thought about the Christmases I'd missed pulling drunks out of ditches. I thought about the time I saved Mr. Henderson's own son from a wreck. Then I looked at the monitors behind him. The weather radar showed a massive band of freezing rain turning into sleet just north of the city. The scanner was quiet, but I knew that silence wouldn't last. "Rick," I said calmly, "do you know what heavy recovery certified means?" "It means you drove a big truck," he sneered. "I can put Mike in it tomorrow." "Mike is Class B," I said. "He can't legally operate the rotator. If something big happens tonight, an overturned tanker, a bus, a jackknifed 18-wheeler, you have nobody." "Rusty is broken. I am the only one." "I think I can manage a tow truck company without your advice, sweetie," Rick said. "Keys, now." I looked at him one last time. I saw the arrogance of a man who had never faced a real crisis. "Okay," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the stapler at his head, even though the urge was strong enough to make my fingers twitch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy ring of keys. There was the ignition key for the beast, the key to the tool lockers, the master key for the gate, and the small silver key for the fuel pumps. I unclipped the electronic fob that gave me access to the police radio frequencies, a fob that was tied specifically to my personal ID number. I placed them gently on the counter. The metal clinked against the laminate. "There you go," I said. Rick snatched them up like a child grabbing a toy. "See, was that so hard? Now clear out your locker. I want you off the property in 10 minutes." I turned around and walked out of the office. The cold air outside felt different now. It didn't feel like a burden anymore, it felt like freedom. I walked to the locker room, opened my locker, and grabbed my personal gear. My heavy-duty gloves, my personalized hard hat, my thermos, and my framed certifications. I took the certifications off the wall: my Master Rigger license, my Hazmat endorsement, my Recmaster 6-7 certification. These weren't company property, they were mine. I'd earned them with sweat and blood. Without these certificates physically in the truck, the beast was just a very large, very illegal paperweight. I walked back out to the parking lot. My personal truck, an old Ford pickup, was parked near the fence. I tossed my gear into the passenger seat. As I started my engine, I looked back at the dispatch window. Rick was back on the phone, laughing, probably bragging to a buddy about how he just cleaned house. I checked my watch, 2:45 a.m. The temperature was dropping. The sleet was starting to mix with the rain, creating a slushy mess on the pavement. I pulled out of the gate, the tires crunching on the gravel. I didn't look back. I drove 3 miles down the road to an all-night diner called The Fifth Wheel. It was a trucker spot. The coffee was strong and the eggs were greasy. I sat down in a booth near the back, ordered a black coffee, and waited. I didn't go home. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. My phone sat on the table in front of me. At 3:15 a.m., the police scanner app on my phone chirped. Dispatch to all units, we have a 1050 major on I-95 northbound, mile marker 102. Multiple vehicles involved. Looks like a tractor-trailer lost traction. I took a sip of coffee. Mile marker 102, that was the S-curve, a notorious stretch of highway that banked hard to the left. If you hit that ice patch at speed, physics took over. Control, this is Trooper Davis. Upgrade that to a code 3. The semi has jackknifed. The trailer is breached. It's blocking all 3 lanes. Traffic is stopped. We need a heavy wrecker ASAP. I watched the steam rise from my cup. Copy Davis, contacting Henderson Towing for the rotation. I smiled just a little. I imagined Rick's phone ringing. I imagined him looking at the board, seeing the beast sitting in Bay 1, and realizing that the keys were in his hand but the driver was gone. I wasn't too slow anymore. Now I was just absent, and the highway was about to find out exactly what that meant. I sat in the diner, the red vinyl of the booth cool against my back, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone from piping hot to lukewarm. My phone buzzed again, the screen illuminating the dark corner of the booth. It was a text from Mike, the junior driver. "Did you quit? Rick is freaking out." I didn't reply. I just watched the steam rise from my cup. Outside the window, the sleet had turned into a relentless, icy rain that froze the moment it hit the asphalt. I turned my attention to the scanner app on my phone. The chatter was picking up. "Dispatch, this is Trooper Davis. The semi is fully blocking all 3 lanes plus the emergency shoulder. The trailer is breached, looks like a load of steel coils. We have gridlock backing up for 2 miles already. Where is that wrecker?" Copy Davis, Henderson Towing has been notified. ETA is 20 minutes. 20 minutes, I snorted softly. Rick had no idea what he was doing. Even if he woke up every driver on the roster, none of them were certified for a rotator recovery involving spilled cargo. To move a loaded trailer that had split open, you needed precision. You needed to calculate the center of gravity, the tensile strength of the straps, the angle of the boom. You needed to be an artist with a 60-ton brush. Mike was a good kid, but he'd only been driving for 6 months. He was terrified of the rotator. The controls looked like the cockpit of a fighter jet to him, and Rusty, the old backup wrecker, was sitting in pieces in the shop. I took another sip of coffee. The waitress, a kindly woman named Brenda who had seen me in here 1,000 times over the years, came by to top me off. "Rough night?" she asked, glancing at my phone. "You could say that," I replied. "Just watching the show." "Looks bad out there," she said, nodding toward the window. "Radio says I-95 is a parking lot." "It's about to get worse," I murmured. At 3:45 a.m., my phone rang. It was the dispatch line. "Rick," I let it ring. It rang again at 3:47 and 3:50. Finally, at 3:55, a voicemail notification popped up. I didn't listen to it. I knew what it said. Diane, where are you? We have a situation. Pick up. I finished my coffee and signaled for the check. Keep the change, Brenda, I said, dropping a $10 bill on the table. I walked out to my truck. The air was frigid now, biting through my jacket. I could see the glow of emergency lights reflecting off the low clouds in the distance to the north. That was the wreck. I drove my pickup slowly toward the scene, taking the back roads that ran parallel to the highway. I knew every shortcut, every service road, every hidden access point. I wasn't going to help Rick. I was going to watch. When I reached an overpass that looked down on mile marker 102, I pulled over and killed the engine. The sight below was chaotic. An 18-wheeler lay across the highway like a beached whale. The cab was twisted at an impossible angle, facing the wrong way. The trailer had split open like a ripe melon, spilling massive coils of steel across the lanes. Cars were backed up as far as the eye could see, their headlights creating a river of white in the darkness. Blue and red lights flashed rhythmically, bouncing off the wet pavement. Trooper Davis was down there, waving his flashlight, trying to direct traffic onto the narrow, muddy shoulder, but it was futile. The rig was blocking everything. And there, in the middle of the chaos, sat a Henderson towing flatbed truck. Mike's truck. It looked like a toy next to the overturned semi. I watched as Mike jumped out of the cab, looking small and lost in his reflective vest. He walked up to the trooper, gestured at the wreck, and then threw his hands up in despair. I could almost hear the conversation. I can't move that. It weighs 80,000 pounds. My winch is rated for 10. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mike. Diane, please. Rick sent me out here. I can't do this. The cops are screaming at me. Rick says just hook it and drag it. If I do that, I'll tear the trailer apart and spill the load everywhere. Help me. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Then I put the phone down. Not yet. By 4:30 a.m., the backup had stretched to 5 miles. The highway was a parking lot of frustrated commuters, long-haul truckers, and delivery vans. Horns were blaring in a discordant symphony of anger. From my vantage point on the overpass, I could see the ripple effect. The traffic jam was starting to clog the on-ramps and the secondary roads. The entire transportation network of the county was grinding to a halt because one man thought he knew better than 30 years of experience. The police scanner was frantic. Control, this is Sergeant Miller. What is the status on that heavy wrecker? We have ambulances trying to get through on the shoulder, but the debris field is too wide. We need a lane opened now. Sergeant Miller, that was Captain Miller's son. He was a good officer, tough but fair. If he was getting involved, it meant the pressure was coming from the top. Dispatch to Miller. Henderson Towing advises they are experiencing technical difficulties with their primary unit. They are dispatching a secondary team. Secondary team? I whispered to myself, there is no secondary team. I watched as another Henderson truck arrived, a medium-duty wrecker driven by a guy named Steve. Steve was a decent mechanic but a terrible operator. He pulled up behind Mike's flatbed, and the two of them stood in the rain, looking at the massive steel coil blocking the fast lane. They hooked a chain to it. I winced. They were hooking to the strap, not the coil itself. Don't do it, I murmured. The medium-duty truck revved its engine. The chain went taut. Snap. The strap broke with a sound like a gunshot. The steel coil rolled a few feet, then settled back down with a heavy thud, cracking the asphalt. Trooper Davis threw his hat on the ground. My phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the dispatch line. It was a private number. I answered. Diane. The voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the underlying fury. It was Captain Miller. Hello, Captain, I said calmly. Where the hell are you? He asked. My guys are telling me Henderson sent a flatbed and a medium-duty to a jackknifed semi with a spilled load. They're playing games out there. I'm not at work, Captain, I said. I was fired at 2:30 this morning. There was a long silence on the other end. Fired, Miller repeated, his voice dangerously low. By who? The new manager, Rick, said I was too slow for a woman. Took my keys, took my pass. You're the only heavy operator on the rotation list, Miller said. Does he know that? I told him. He didn't believe me. Jesus, Miller hissed. Diane, I have a hazardous materials tanker stuck in this traffic jam 3 miles back. If that thing gets hit or starts leaking, we have a mass casualty event. I need that road cleared. I know, Captain, but I don't have a truck, I don't have keys, I'm a civilian right now. Stay put, Miller said. I'm calling Henderson. Captain, I said, don't call Henderson, call Rick. Let him explain it to you. Miller paused. You want him to hang himself. I want him to understand physics, I said, and the cost of arrogance. All right, Miller said. I'll make the call, but keep your phone on. I might need you to consult. I'm just watching the sunrise, Captain, I said. I hung up. The sky was turning a bruised purple in the east. The rain hadn't stopped. Down below, Steve and Mike were trying to wrap a chain around the axle of the trailer now. They were going to try to drag the whole thing sideways. You're going to twist the frame, I said to the empty cab of my pickup. Sure enough, as the medium duty pulled, the trailer groaned. Metal shrieked against metal. The trailer didn't slide, it dug in. The rear doors buckled. Trooper Davis was screaming at them now, waving his arms to stop. It was 5:15 a.m. The morning rush hour was beginning, and I-95 was dead in the water. The sun rose on a scene of absolute devastation. The rain had stopped, leaving everything slick and gray. The backup was now 10 miles long. News helicopters were circling overhead, their rotors thumping in the distance. I turned on the local news radio station. Traffic nightmare on I-95 North. A jackknife tractor-trailer has completely closed the interstate for over 3 hours. Authorities say recovery efforts are stalled. Commuters are advised to seek alternate routes, but side roads are also gridlocked. My phone was silent for a while. Rick must have been too busy panicking to call me again. Then, at 6:00 a.m., my personal cell rang. It was Rick. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately, and again. I answered on the fourth ring. Hello, I said, yawning theatrically. Diane, thank God. Rick sounded breathless, his voice an octave higher than usual. Where are you? I need you to come in, right now. I'm sorry, who is this? I asked. It's Rick, from dispatch. Look, we have a situation, a big one. The police are going crazy. Mike and Steve can't move this thing. You need to come down here and take the beast out. Rick, I said slowly, you fired me, remember, too slow for a woman. You took my keys. Okay, look, I was stressed, Rick stammered. I didn't mean it like that. We can talk about it later, just get here. The cops are threatening to pull our contract. I'm afraid I can't do that, Rick, I said. I'm not an employee of Henderson Towing anymore. Insurance won't cover me. If I touch that truck, it's a liability. I'll rehire you, right now, over the phone. I don't think so, I said. I'm enjoying my morning off. I was thinking of taking up knitting, something fast. Diane, please, he yelled. The owner is calling me. The news is here, just come to the job. You said it was a simple job, I reminded him. Just hook and drag, Mike can do it. Mike is an idiot, he almost flipped the medium duty. Mike is inexperienced, I corrected him. And you sent him to do a job that requires a master rigger. That's on you, Rick. Name your price, he said, desperate now. Double time, triple time, just get here. I looked down at the highway. The queue of cars was endless. People were standing outside their vehicles, shivering in the cold. I saw a mother trying to calm a crying baby in the back of a sedan. I wasn't doing this for Rick, but I couldn't let those people suffer forever. It's not about the money, Rick, I said. It's about respect. And safety, you compromised both. I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry, just help me. I'm not helping you, I said. I'm helping the highway, but I'm not coming back as an employee. I'm coming as an independent contractor, and my rate is different for contractors. Fine, whatever, just get the truck. And one more thing, I said. I want that apology in writing. Text it to me. I, Rick, admit that I was wrong to fire Diane and that I am incompetent to manage heavy recovery operations. Send it. Are you serious? Dead serious. Or you can call another company from 2 counties over. They might be there by noon. I heard him hyperventilating on the other end. "Fine," he choked out. A moment later, my phone pinged. The text message appeared. Rick, admit that I was wrong to fire Diane and that I am incompetent to manage heavy recovery operations." I smiled. "All right, Rick, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Have the beast warmed up." And Rick. "What?" "Stay out of my way." My phone was still warm in my hand from Rick's desperate pleading when I dialed Captain Miller. The sun was fully up now, casting long, pale shadows across the gridlocked highway below. "Captain," I said when he picked up on the first ring, "I'm heading in." "About time," Miller grunted, though I could hear the relief in his voice. "Rick finally cave." "He's begging," I said, "and I got it in writing. He admitted he's incompetent." Miller let out a short, sharp laugh. "Good, but Diane, listen to me. This isn't just about Rick anymore. The mayor is on my ass. The dot commissioner is calling every 10 minutes. That chemical tanker is still stuck in the queue, and the temperature is rising. If we don't clear this wreck in the next hour, we're looking at a HAZMAT evacuation of the entire corridor." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. A HAZMAT evacuation for a jackknife. "It's the backup," Miller explained. "Ambulances can't get through. Fire trucks are blocked. If anything happens in that 5-mile stretch, a heart attack, a car fire, a fuel leak, we're paralyzed. You are the only heavy recovery asset that can reach the scene." "I understand," I said, my voice hardening. "Captain, I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "When I get to the yard, Rick is going to try to micromanage me. He's going to try to tell me how to rig the load. I need you to give a direct order to your officers on the scene." "What order?" "Tell them that the recovery operation is under my sole command. If Rick tries to interfere, if he steps 1 foot into the safety zone, have him removed." "Done," Miller said instantly. "I'll radio Davis and the on-scene commander right now. You have full operational authority. Just get that road open, Diane." "I'm moving," I said. I hung up and started my truck. As I drove toward the Henderson yard, I could see the flashing lights of police motorcycles trying to weave through the stagnant traffic. They were escorting something, probably a specialized response team for the chemical tanker. The stakes were getting higher by the minute. When I pulled up to the gate of Henderson Towing, Rick was standing there in the rain, pacing back and forth. He looked frantic. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his expensive jacket was soaked. He didn't even wait for me to park. He ran up to my window as I rolled it down. "Where have you been?" he shrieked. "The police are threatening to tow us." "Get in," I said calmly. "We're taking the beast." "I'm driving," Rick declared, reaching for the door handle. I locked the door. "No, you're not. You're riding shotgun, and you're going to shut up." He stared at me, mouth agape, but the sheer force of my glare made him step back. He walked around to the passenger side and climbed in, sulking like a scolded child. I climbed into the driver's seat of the beast. The familiarity of the controls was instantly comforting. I checked the gauges, oil pressure good, air pressure building, hydraulic fluid levels optimal. I flipped the master switch for the strobe lights, and the amber beacons began to rotate, casting a rhythmic pulse against the gray morning sky. "Let's go," I muttered. I pulled out of the yard, the massive diesel engine roaring. Rick sat silently beside me, clutching his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen as if waiting for a miracle. "Don't text," I said without looking at him. "It distracts me." He put the phone down. We hit the highway shoulder, bypassing the miles of stopped cars. People rolled down their windows to watch us pass, hope flickering on their tired faces. They saw the heavy wrecker coming, and they knew help was finally on the way. But they didn't know the battle I was about to fight. Not with the wreckage, but with the man sitting next to me. We arrived at the scene 10 minutes later. It was worse up close. The jackknifed semi was a twisted mess of steel and fiberglass. The trailer had split open completely, spilling 3 massive coils of steel, each weighing 20,000 pounds, across all 3 lanes. The tractor unit was wedged against the concrete median barrier, its fuel tanks ruptured and leaking diesel onto the wet pavement. Firefighters were spraying foam on the spill to prevent a fire. Troopers were shouting into their radios. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was a man in a suit surrounded by cameras. "Is that?" Rick squinted through the windshield. "The mayor," I confirmed. "And the press." Rick went pale. Oh God, my career is over." "Your career ended 3 hours ago," I said dryly. "Now sit here and don't move." I parked the beast perpendicular to the wreck, positioning the stabilizers carefully on the solid asphalt. I climbed down from the cab, grabbing my hard hat and high-visibility vest. The moment my boots hit the ground, Trooper Davis rushed over. "Diane," he shouted over the noise of the idling engines. "Thank God, Miller said you were coming. We have a serious problem." "I see it," I said, gesturing to the spilled coils. "Those coils are going to be a nightmare to move without a crane." "We don't have time for a crane," Davis said. "The chemical tanker 3 miles back is reporting a pressure buildup. If we don't get traffic moving in 20 minutes, they're going to declare a mandatory evacuation zone." 20 minutes, I looked at the wreck. "Davis, this is a 2-hour job minimum." "You have 20 minutes to open one lane," Davis clarified. "Just shove enough debris aside to let the tanker through. Then you can take your time with the rest." "Understood," I said. "I need everyone back. I mean everyone, including the mayor." Davis nodded grimly. "Consider it done." I walked toward the wreck, assessing the angles. To clear a lane, I would need to lift the tractor unit and swing it clear of the median, then use the boom to drag the steel coils to the shoulder. It was risky. If a strap broke, a 20,000-pound coil could roll right through the line of stopped cars. Suddenly, Rick appeared at my elbow. He had ignored my instructions to stay in the truck. "Okay, here's the plan," he announced loudly, trying to look authoritative for the cameras. "We hook the winch to the front bumper and pull it straight back. Simple physics." I stopped and turned to face him. The cameras were rolling. The mayor was watching. "Rick," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "If you pull from the front bumper, you'll rip the front axle off and the truck will still be stuck. And you'll probably snap the cable, which could decapitate someone." "Don't undermine me," Rick hissed. "I'm the manager." "You're a liability," I said. Then I turned to Davis. "Officer, remove him from the safety zone." Davis stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Sir, step back behind the barrier. Now." "But I'm in charge," Rick protested. "Not anymore," Davis said. "Diane has operational command. Move." Rick sputtered, looking from me to the trooper to the cameras. He realized, too late, that he had lost control of the narrative. He turned and stormed off toward the media huddle, probably to try and spin a story. I ignored him. I had work to do. I climbed up onto the deck of the beast and began operating the hydraulic controls. The boom extended, a massive steel arm reaching out over the wreckage. I lowered the main hook, guiding it with precision toward the frame of the overturned tractor. "Easy, easy," I whispered to myself. I climbed down, dragged the heavy chains through the mud and diesel, and secured them to the truck's frame. I double-checked every connection. Then I climbed back up to the controls. The engine roared as I engaged the winch. The cables went taut. The metal groaned. Slowly, agonizingly, the twisted cab began to lift. From the corner of my eye, I could see Rick talking to a reporter. He was gesturing wildly, pointing at the beast, probably taking credit for my strategy. But then disaster struck. As I lifted the tractor unit, a hidden fuel line ruptured. Diesel sprayed out in a fine mist, coating the wreckage. "Leak, we have a leak." A firefighter shouted. I stopped the winch instantly. Hold. The fire chief ran over. "We need to contain that spill before you move it any further. If that diesel hits the hot exhaust of the wrecker, we go up in flames." "I can't hold it forever," I yelled back. "The hydraulics are under max load." I looked at the pressure gauge. It was redlining. The beast was struggling. The weight of the tractor, combined with the mud suction, was pushing the limits of the equipment. Rick saw the commotion and came running back, ducking under the police tape. "What are you doing?" He screamed. "You're stalling." "Just pull it." "Get back," I yelled. "It's unstable." "Pull it," Rick shouted, reaching for the control lever on the side of the truck. "No." Before I could stop him, Rick grabbed the auxiliary lever, the one that controlled the boom extension, and yanked it. The boom jerked violently. The cable slackened for a split second, then snapped tight with a terrifying boom. The sudden shift in weight caused the tractor unit to swing wildly. It crashed into the concrete barrier, sending sparks flying. The impact dislodged one of the steel coils, which began to roll, slowly at first, then gaining speed, directly toward the line of police cars where the mayor was standing. "Look out!" I screamed. I slammed my hand onto the emergency release, dropping the tractor unit back onto the ground to stabilize the wrecker. Then I grabbed the secondary winch control, the one connected to the drag lines I had preemptively set up around the coils. I engaged the drag winch. The cable whipped tight, catching the rolling coil just 10 feet from the mayor's group. The coil jerked to a halt, digging a trench in the asphalt. Silence fell over the scene. The mayor was white as a sheet. The reporters were stunned. Rick stood there, his hand still hovering near the lever he had pulled. He looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. I thought. He stammered. Captain Miller's voice boomed from the loudspeaker of a newly arrived command vehicle. "Arrest that man." Trooper Davis and 2 other officers tackled Rick before he could take another step. They pinned him against the side of the beast, handcuffing him roughly. "You are under arrest for reckless endangerment and interfering with an emergency operation." Davis shouted. Rick was dragged away, kicking and screaming, past the cameras that were now capturing every second of his humiliation. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly on the controls. "Are you okay, Diane?" Davis asked, running back to me. "I'm fine," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "The load is stabilized. The lane is clear enough for the tanker." "Do it," Davis said. I engaged the winch one last time. With Rick gone, I worked with the precision of a surgeon. I dragged the wreckage aside, clearing a path just wide enough for a single vehicle. 5 minutes later, the chemical tanker rolled slowly past the wreck, its driver giving me a grateful honk. The crisis was averted, but for Rick, the nightmare was just beginning. The immediate crisis was over. The chemical tanker had passed, and the slow trickle of traffic was beginning to move through the single open lane, but the scene was far from clear. The jackknifed rig was still a mangled heap of steel, and the spilled coils were scattered like giant, deadly marbles. I climbed down from the beast, my legs feeling a little shaky. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Captain Miller was walking toward me, his face grim but relieved. Behind him, flanked by 2 officers, was Mr. Henderson. The owner of the company looked older than I remembered. His hair was thinner, his shoulders more stooped. He was staring at Rick, who was currently sitting in the back of a squad car, head in his hands. "Diane," Miller said, extending a hand. "Hell of a job. That second winch line saved the mayor's life." "Just doing my job, Captain," I said, shaking his hand. "Or what used to be my job." Mr. Henderson stepped forward, wringing his hands. He looked like a man who had just watched his legacy crumble on live television. "Diane," he began, his voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I had no idea Rick was this incompetent. He fired me at 2 a.m. for being too slow," I said flatly. "And then he tried to operate a 60-ton rotator without a clue how the hydraulics work. He could have killed everyone here." "I know," Henderson whispered. "I saw the footage. The news crews caught everything. The mayor is furious. The insurance company is already calling." "You hired him," I reminded him. "You let him push out the experienced drivers. You let him cut corners on safety." "I was trying to modernize," Henderson pleaded. "My son said Rick had a vision." "His vision just cost you the police contract," Miller interrupted, his voice cold. "I'm pulling Henderson towing from the rotation effective immediately. Negligence, endangerment, failure to maintain equipment. The list of violations is long." Henderson paled. The police rotation was the lifeblood of the company. Without it, they were just another roadside assistance service. "Please, Captain," Henderson begged. "We can fix this. I'll fire Rick. I'll put Diane back in charge. I'll give her a raise, double her salary." He turned to me, eyes desperate. Diane, please, come back. You can run the whole dispatch floor. Name your price. Just tell the captain we can handle the heavy recoveries. I looked at Henderson. I looked at the old company logo on the side of the beast, a logo I had worn proudly for 30 years. Then I looked at the squad car where Rick was weeping. It's too late, Mr. Henderson, I said softly. You chose efficiency over safety. You chose a kid with a spreadsheet over a veteran with a conscience. The trust is gone. But the company, Henderson stammered. The company died when you let Rick take the keys, I said. I'm sorry. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within an hour, the news had broken. Local towing company loses police contract after manager endangers mayor at crash scene. Captain Miller wasn't bluffing. He formally stripped Henderson Towing of their heavy-duty rotation status right there on the side of the highway. Other towing companies from neighboring counties were called in to assist with the cleanup, but the damage was done. I stayed to finish the job not for Henderson, but because I had started it. I uprighted the tractor, loaded the spilled coils onto flatbeds, and swept the glass off the road myself. By noon, all 3 lanes were open. As I packed up my gear, Miller approached me again. He was holding a clipboard. So, he said, leaning against the side of the beast, you're technically unemployed. Technically retired, I corrected him with a tired smile. I'm thinking about gardening. Gardening is nice, Miller agreed, but it doesn't pay well, and it doesn't help me when a tanker flips on the S-curve next week. What are you saying, Captain? I'm saying the county needs a dedicated heavy recovery specialist, Miller said. Someone with the certification, the experience, and the temperament to handle high-pressure situations. Someone I can trust not to drop a truck on the mayor. He handed me the clipboard. It was a requisition form for an emergency service contract. I can't award the main rotation to a single person, Miller explained. But I can award an emergency override contract to an independent operator. It grants you primary jurisdiction for all heavy recoveries involving hazardous materials or highway blockages. I don't have a truck, Captain, I said. This is Henderson's truck. Henderson is going under, Miller said bluntly. He's facing massive fines and lawsuits. The bank is going to seize his assets within the week, including this truck. He paused, a twinkle in his eye. I happen to know the bank manager. He'd probably be very happy to lease this unit to a contractor with a guaranteed government contract. Rent to own, maybe. I stared at the form. It was a lifeline. No, it was more than that. It was an empire. You're serious? I asked. Dead serious, Miller said. Sign here and you're the boss. No Rick. No Henderson, just you and the road. I looked at the pen. I looked at the highway, stretching out clean and open under the midday sun. I signed. The morning air was crisp as I walked out onto the porch of my new office, a small but tidy building right off exit 104. The sign out front was fresh paint on sturdy wood, Diane's heavy recovery and transport. In the yard, the beast sat gleaming in the sun, freshly painted in a deep, metallic blue. Next to it was a second rotator I had just acquired from an auction and a new flatbed. Mike was there, polishing the chrome on the flatbed. I had hired him the day after Henderson closed its doors. He was a good kid, just needed the right mentor. Morning, boss. Mike called out, waving a rag. Morning, Mike, I called back. Check those tire pressures. We got a call about a stalled bus on Route 9. On it. I sat down on the porch steps with my coffee. It was quiet for now. The scanner inside the office was humming softly, monitoring the frequencies. The life twist wasn't just that I got my job back. It was that the job had evolved. I wasn't just a driver anymore. I was the owner. I set the standards. I trained the new generation. And I made sure that safety always came before speed. Rick. He pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment. He was doing community service, cleaning up trash on the side of the very highway he used to dispatch. I saw him sometimes when I drove by. He never looked up. Henderson retired to Florida, a broken man. His company was liquidated to pay the fines. As for me, I had never been happier. The work was hard, the hours were long, but it was mine.